Hello everyone, Dr. Polaris here. During the Late Triassic, a large clade of pseudosuchians diverged from the bipedal predatory Rauisuchids, and would go on to achieve great success during the following Jurassic period. These were the Crocodylomorphs, a highly diverse lineage that would produce terrestrial carnivores, fully aquatic piscivores, armoured herbivores, and all of the modern crocodilians that survive today. However, the oldest and most basal forms were generally rather small, firmly terrestrial animals that hunted insects, amphibians, and sphenodontians. In fact, many early crocodylomorphs were quite dog-like in terms of appearance, being mostly quadrupedal, possessing narrow snouts and elongated limbs positioned directly beneath their bodies. These forms were fairly successful in the Late Triassic, and survived the extinction event at the end of the period, likely due to their modest size and unfussy eating habits. Given that they formed a sister lineage to the Rauisuchids, which were generally large apex predators, it was unclear how these far smaller forms emerged, given that no intermediate genera were known until relatively recently. This changed in 2015 with the discovery of the genus Carnifex. This fearsome animal, known from several partial specimens, was uncovered from late Triassic rocks in North Carolina, which were dated to approximately 231 million years ago. Measuring 3 metres or 10 feet long and standing 4.9 feet tall, Carnifex was most likely a bipedal carnivore. The holotype specimen on which these estimates were based appears to have been a juvenile, given that the neurocentral canals remained unossified. Fully grown adults could have measured over 4 metres, or at least 13 feet long. The skull was proportionally large and somewhat elongated, with a pointed snout that contained numerous small blade-like teeth. A preserved right humerus associated with the holotype suggests that the forelimbs were significantly smaller than the hind limbs, much like the condition seen in Postosuchus. Carnifex inhabited the Pekin Formation, which stretches across the Carolinas and preserves the remains of fluvial systems that crossed a semi-arid region that was located just north of the equator during the Carnian. This fossil site contains many specimens that have yet to be officially described, including an Aetosaur, another crocodylomorph, and a dicynodont. Carnifex may have been the largest predator in this ecosystem, although it is possible that Rauisuchids may also have been present but have simply not yet been found. Regardless, this animal was a formidable predator, and represents something of a transitional stage between the massive Rauisuchids and the smaller, slender, and more derived crocodylomorphs. A close relative, labelled as CM73372, appears to have been quite a similar genus, although it has yet to be formally described. Following on from Carnifex, all of the more derived crocodylomorphs that fell outside of the later clade Crocodiliforms were initially classified as belonging to a group known as the Sphenosuchians. Until the early 2000s, this was considered to be a genuine suborder of modestly sized Leggy and cursorial pseudosuchians, although more recent studies, such as one conducted by Nesbitt et al. In 2011, found Sphenosuchia to be a grade leading up to Crocodiliforms. One of these animals was the genus Hesperosuchus from Carnian age deposits of New Mexico and Arizona roughly 220 million years ago. A lithe, long-legged animal measuring between 4 and 5 feet long, this animal was comparable to a border collie dog in terms of size. The hind limbs are noticeably longer than the forelimbs, although not to the same degree as seen in more basal animals such as Postosuchus and relatives. This means that Hesperosuchus was probably a fluctuative biped, walking on all fours most of the time, but choosing to run on its hind limbs when chasing after small prey. The animal dwelt in a floodplain environment, and may have preyed on the fish and amphibians that frequented these areas. Hesperosuchus would have had to be on the lookout to avoid becoming prey itself, as is demonstrated by the remains of a juvenile contained within the stomach cavity of the early theropod dinosaur Coelophysis. A closely related and very similar genus, Dromicosuchus, dwelt in North Carolina, with its holotype containing a large bite mark to the neck and lower jaw inflicted by an unnamed Rauisuchian, which was discovered lying on top of the specimen. Both predator and prey were then buried, possibly by a landslide, with their remains being preserved together. Slightly more derived were a pair of genera comprising Sphenosuchus and Redondavenator. The former was native to the early Jurassic Elliott Formation of South Africa, approximately 195 million years ago. Known from a well-preserved skull and some partial hind limb elements, Sphenosuchus was another small form, measuring about 4.5 feet long, and would have been an active carnivore. It lived alongside a variety of basal ornithischians, sauropodomorphs and theropods, while prey would have included the shrew-like mammalia form Megazostrodon. Redonda venator was native to New Mexico about 200 million years ago, and may have been the largest of the so-called Sphenosuchians, measuring an estimated 4 metres or 13 feet long. This is notably more massive than most of its relatives, and perhaps represents a genus moving into the vacated niches left open by the extinction of the Rauisuchids. A more typical form was the Chinese Dibothrosuchus from the early Jurassic of Yunnan province. A slender animal about 4 feet in length, studies of the well-preserved cranium indicate a strong sense of hearing similar to modern crocodilians. The snout was narrow and relatively elongated, while 2 rows of osteoderms run along the back and tail, providing a degree of protection from predators. One of the most famous and well-studied basal crocodylomorphs was Terrestrisuchus, from the Late Triassic of Wales and southern England. It was a very small animal, only 76 centimetres or 30 inches long, and inhabited a tropical coastal environment consisting of limestone karst caves and rocky outcrops. The limbs were highly elongated and adapted for quick darting movements, ideal for scrambling up uneven terrain while chasing after small reptiles such as the rhynchocephalian Clevosaurus. Interestingly, unlike the more basal Rauisuchids, Terrestrisuchus did not possess the so-called pillar erect stance, with the head of the femur instead fitting into the hip socket at a right angle to the leg. This structure was convergently very similar to that of theropod dinosaurs, demonstrating adaptations for a cursorial hunting niche. Another highly gracile genus was Almadasuchus, from the early Jurassic of South Africa, a slender-snouted hunter of small prey. In late Triassic Europe, the more obviously bipedal Saltoposuchus hunted mammaliforms and rhynchocephalians. This animal was about 1.5 metres or about 5 feet long, with forelimbs quite a lot shorter than the hind limbs and was superficially theropod-like in appearance. When first described in the 1920s from fossil material recovered in southern Germany, Saltoposuchus was considered to be an ancestral dinosaur due to its bipedal stance and light build. Recent scientific analyses have disproven this, however, demonstrating that the genus was a pseudosuchian instead. The most derived of these basal crocodylomorphs were a small family known as Hallopodidae, containing 3 genera that were native to the Americas during the Jurassic period. The oldest genus was Almadasuchus, from Oxfordian deposits of Argentina and dated to about 160 million years ago. The 2 remaining genera were both inhabitants of the late Jurassic Morrison Formation, with both being named by Othniel Marsh in the 1880s. Hallopus was 1 metre or approximately 3 feet long, and represented by a holotype consisting of near-complete forelimbs and hind limbs, along with a smattering of vertebrae and skull fragments. Like most basal crocodylomorphs, it was a cursorial predator that hunted small vertebrates such as lizards, mammals and amphibians. Its close relative, Macellionathus, was very similar in appearance, albeit slightly larger at up to 6.2 feet long. This genus was found at the Como Bluff outcropping of the Morrison Formation, and lived alongside famous dinosaurs such as Allosaurus, Diplodocus and Stegosaurus, being among the very last of the non-crocodiliform pseudosuchians. It is a little remarkable and a testament to their adaptability that these modest animals could survive for the entirety of the Jurassic, when so many of their larger pseudosuchian relatives vanished in the extinction event at the end of the Triassic. The Crocodiliforms would go on to tremendous success in the Jurassic, producing a whole host of forms that inhabited a wide array of niches. The dinosaurs may have taken over many ecological roles after the Triassic, but the pseudosuchians would remain a vital component of most environments for the remainder of the Mesozoic. But that is a story for another time. Thanks for watching, everyone. The next episode will cover the remainder of the saber-toothed cat-clade Homotherini, so until then, I'll see you again soon. Cheerio.